The flames from dozens of black candles danced, casting bizarre, distorted shadows on the cold stone walls. The air was thick with the smell of incense and something cloying, sickeningly sweet like metal. Elara Vance lay on the frigid marble floor, her body covered only by a thin sheet of white silk. Her skin trembled not from the cold, but from a primal terror that gnawed at every cell. Around her, a circle of figures in black robes, their faces hidden by hoods, stood as silent as statues. They were the most powerful people in Hollywood, faces she had once admired in magazines and on the silver screen. But now, under the flickering candlelight, they were not famous stars or renowned producers. They were priests of a gruesome ceremony, and she was the sacrifice. A woman stepped out from the shadows. Her figure was elegant in a black velvet dress, her platinum blonde hair styled in a neat bun, and her icy blue eyes seemed to pierce through Elara's very soul. It was Ms. Evelyn Reed, the legendary producer, a woman who could make or break a career with the snap of her fingers. Elara Vance. Evelyn's voice rang out smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. You have been chosen. You crave fame. You crave power. Tonight, you will be reborn. She gestured, and two men from the circle stepped forward, turning Elara onto her stomach. The thin silk slipped from her shoulders. She felt a cold metal object touch her back, and a searing pain erupted as it began to carve a symbol into her flesh. Elara bit her lip to keep from screaming, hot tears rolling down her temples. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled her nostrils, mingling with the incense to create the scent of hell itself. As the physical pain and terror reached their peak, Elara's mind suddenly drifted, reeling back 6 months to the day the wheels of fate began to turn. 6 months ago, Elara's life was still a string of bright hopes and dreams. She and her best friend Chloe were sitting on the lawn of the University of Southern California USC campus, holding nearly melted iced coffees. The late afternoon Los Angeles sun cast a golden glow over everything, but a restless anxiety churned within Elara. "Are you sure about this, Elara?" Chloe asked, her voice full of concern. "Leaving Ohio, using all your savings to come here to study acting. I know you're talented, but Hollywood is a monster. It swallows people like us whole." Elara looked her friend straight in the eye, a determined smile on her lips. "That's exactly why I had to come, Chloe. It is a monster. I want to be a star. I want my name carved on the Walk of Fame. I want to make my family proud. Back home, everyone thought my dream was absurd. They said a small-town girl could never compete with people who were born and raised here. I didn't come here to fail," she added, her voice firm. Just then, a collective gasp of excitement drew their attention. On the large screen hanging in front of the student union, a promotional trailer was playing on a loop. Explosive action sequences, A-list actors, and the logo of a legendary studio, Meridian Pictures. The final text appeared on the screen, causing the whole campus to erupt. "Nationwide casting call. Seeking a new face. Held at USC." "That's next week," Elara whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. "Do you understand, Chloe? This is it. This is the chance. Everything could change right now." On the day of the audition, thousands of students and young actors formed an endless line in front of the main hall, each heart pounding with hope. Elara stood in line, her hands clenched. She remembered the sleepless nights spent memorizing lines, the look in her mother's eyes when she promised she would return a star. When it was her turn, she stepped into a vast room. The casting directors sat impassively behind a long table. Elara took a deep breath and began. The monologue she had prepared came out with astonishing emotional intensity. Every word, every glance, every gesture held the entirety of her dreams and sacrifices. A heavy silence fell after she finished. Then one of the judges, a tired-looking man, slowly nodded. "Thank you. We'll be in touch." Elara's heart sank a little, but she still managed a smile and left the room. Chloe was waiting in the hallway. "How did it go?" "They said they'll be in touch," Elara replied, trying to hide her disappointment. But 3 days later, she received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end wasn't from Meridian Pictures' casting department. It was a deep, powerful female voice introducing herself as Ms. Evelyn Reed's assistant. Ms. Reed was very impressed with your performance, the woman said. She would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at her office in Century City to discuss your future. The next day, Elara stood before a skyscraper of glass and steel, her heart hammering against her ribs. Evelyn Reed's office was on the top floor with a panoramic view of all of Los Angeles. The room was minimally but luxuriously decorated, exuding an air of cold authority. Evelyn Reed sat in a leather armchair, sizing Elara up from head to toe like a predator observing its prey. "Hello, Elara," she said, her voice deceptively sweet. "Your performance caught our attention. And mine specifically. I see a hunger in you. You're willing to do anything to succeed, aren't you?" Elara swallowed her throat dry. "Yes, ma'am. I would do anything to make my dream come true." Evelyn Reed's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good. Then this is not a typical acting contract. This is a commitment, an investment." She pushed a leather-bound portfolio across the desk toward Elara. "This contract guarantees you fame, success, and roles that others can only dream of. You will be taken to heights rarely reached by any young actress." Elara quickly flipped through the pages. Her eyes stopped on a line of very fine print at the bottom of one page, and pledges to adhere to the rights and traditions of the Society for the duration of the commitment. The Society? Elara looked up, frowning. "What is that?" Evelyn Reed's smile became enigmatic. "A long-standing tradition in our world. A circle of trust and absolute loyalty. Don't worry, it's merely a formality. A step to prove your determination." She pushed a black fountain pen toward her, decorated with a golden serpent coiled around its body. "You want to achieve your dream, don't you, Elara? Then sign, and open the door to your destiny." Elara's hand trembled. She thought of her mother, of her promises, of her own burning desire. She picked up the pen and signed her name on the page. A faint shiver ran down Evelyn Reed's spine. "Welcome, Elara. You have just taken your first step on the path to greatness." Evelyn Reed's voice pulled Elara back to the brutal reality. The pain from her seared back and the overwhelming humiliation consumed her. She was no longer the naive acting student. She had signed a pact with the devil. "The ritual is almost complete," Evelyn declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. "When the symbol is finished, your soul will belong to us forever. You will be one of us." Elara closed her eyes, a final tear of innocence rolling down onto the cold stone floor. The performance of her life had just begun, a performance from which there was no escape. Elara awoke in a bed draped with soft Egyptian cotton sheets. Morning sunlight streamed through the gaps in the panoramic windows, painting long streaks of light on the plush carpet. She was in a hotel suite somewhere high above a still sleeping Los Angeles. Everything was so quiet and luxurious, it felt surreal. If not for the dull, throbbing pain in her back, she would have thought last night was just a nightmare. She sat up slowly, the silk sheet pooling around her naked waist. She walked to the large mirror in the bathroom, her heart pounding as if it would burst from her chest. She turned around. There, just below her right shoulder blade, was a dark red mark, still slightly swollen. It was the shape of an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, but in the center of the circle was a wide-open eye. The symbol felt like a hideous parasite latched onto her skin, a permanent reminder of the horrific night. A wave of nausea washed over her, and Elara gripped the marble sink, gasping for air. She had sold her soul. No worse. She had let them brand it. On the bedside table, her clothes were washed and neatly folded. Beside them was a black velvet box. Elara opened it. Inside was a brand new phone and a small card. Evelyn Reed's elegant slanted handwriting read, "Welcome to your new life. This phone is your only line of communication with us. Await instructions." No explanation, no apology, just cold, calculated control. Elara dressed quickly, feeling as though the clothes belonged to someone else, to a naive girl who had died last night. She took a taxi back to the small apartment she shared with Chloe. The entire way she stared out the window, but the familiar buildings and palm trees of Los Angeles now looked alien and threatening. Every passing face could be a member of the society. Every black car could be following her. Chloe was at the kitchen table, too worried to eat. When she saw Elara walk in, she rushed over and threw her arms around her friend. "Oh my God! Elara, where have you been all night? I called you 100 times. I was about to call the police." Elara stiffened in her friend's embrace. How could she possibly explain? I'm sorry, Chloe," she stammered, trying to invent a plausible story. "After the meeting, they invited me to an intensive acting workshop. It went all night. No phones allowed. It was very demanding." Chloe pulled back, studying Elara's face. "An all-night workshop. That sounds strange. You look so pale. Did they do something to you?" "No, nothing," Elara said, quickly avoiding her friend's eyes. "It was just exhausting, mentally and physically draining. But I learned so much." It was the first lie, and it slipped from her lips with terrifying ease. An invisible wall began to rise between her and her best friend. From that moment, Elara knew she was alone in this new world. The following days passed in a fog of anxiety and confusion. Elara was tormented by nightmares. She saw the soulless faces behind the hoods, felt the burning pain on her back again, and heard Evelyn Reed's voice echoing in her head. But mixed with the horror was another feeling, a guilty sense of anticipation. She had made a sacrifice. She had paid the price. Now she waited for her reward. She convinced herself this was the only way. Hollywood was full of stories about actors who had to do terrible things to get a role. Perhaps this was just a more extreme version of that. She had to make her sacrifice worthwhile. A week later, the new phone rang. A deep, emotionless voice spoke on the other end without giving a name. "There's a role for you. The TV show City of Sin. A small but crucial part. You'll play the first victim, the one who kicks off the entire investigation. The script will be sent to your email. The shoot is the day after tomorrow. Don't be late." The call ended. No audition, no negotiation, just an order. 2 days later, Elara was on set. She felt lost and small amidst the hustle and bustle of the film crew. But when she introduced herself to the assistant director, something strange happened. His gruff expression immediately softened, replaced by a welcoming, almost fawning smile. "Ah, Ms. Vance, a pleasure to meet you. The director is waiting for you. Everyone is very excited to be working with you." The special treatment continued. The director, a notoriously difficult man, spoke to her with uncharacteristic respect. The lead actor, an A-lister she had only admired from afar, came over personally to shake her hand and greet her. Every door opened for her with unbelievable ease. She could feel the invisible power of the society at work, like a giant hand clearing her path. Her scene only took 1 day to shoot. She poured all her horror, trauma, and pain into the role of the murdered girl. When the director yelled, "Cut!" the entire set fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. The difficult director came over and patted her on the shoulder, his eyes shining with admiration. "Brilliant, kid. Absolutely brilliant. You have a very big future ahead of you." On the way home, Elara felt a strange sense of intoxication. It was the first taste of success, of recognition. It was sweet, addictive, and it temporarily masked the bitter taste of her sacrifice. For the next 3 months, the cycle continued. The phone would ring and another role would come her way. A guest spot on a popular sitcom. A supporting role with a few lines in a critically acclaimed indie film. Each opportunity was slightly bigger than the last. She didn't have to fight, didn't have to claw her way up. The path was laid with a red carpet for her. All she had to do was walk. Within 6 months after a series of small but memorable roles, Elara's name started getting noticed. A famous director saw her in the indie film and cast her in a significant supporting role in his next major project. The film was an unexpected blockbuster. Elara's face, though only on screen for a few scenes, left a deep impression on audiences and critics alike. Money began to pour into her bank account. Elara moved out of the apartment she shared with Chloe and into a luxury condo in West Hollywood. She told Chloe it was money she had saved up, another lie to cover the truth. The distance between them grew wider. One evening while browsing online, Elara froze. The first poster for her upcoming film had been released. Her name was printed just below the two main stars. Her face, artfully and mysteriously photographed, stared out from the poster. She had made it. She was becoming a star. A wave of pride, intense and overwhelming, washed over her. She looked at her image on the screen, a beautiful, promising young woman. But when she looked into her own eyes in the photo, she saw an emptiness, a profound sadness that the perfect makeup couldn't hide. Just then the society's phone rang. This time it was the smooth, cold voice of Evelyn Reed on the other end. "You've done well, Elara," she said. "The warm-up is over. Now it's time for a real role. A role that will change everything. But first we have something to attend to. A celebration. Tomorrow night. You know where to go." The call ended. Elara sat motionless in the darkness of her luxurious apartment. The excitement about the big role was instantly extinguished by a rising tide of terror. She knew what a celebration meant. She had to go back to that place. The forbidden fruit she had tasted had the sweet flavor of fame, but she now realized it had been laced with poison, and she had already swallowed it. The black Lincoln sedan glided silently through the glittering streets of Beverly Hills. Elara sat in the back seat, as still as a statue. She wore an expensive black cocktail dress, a gift that had been delivered to her apartment that afternoon without a note. It fit perfectly. Like everything else in her new life, it had been preordained. The car turned onto a quiet road, passed through an unmarked iron gate, and stopped in front of an old Spanish-style mansion hidden behind ivy-covered walls. The place looked deceptively normal, but when the driver opened her door, Elara felt a familiar chilling draft. She knew that beneath this luxurious facade lay the stairs to the hell where she had been reborn. She entered the stone chamber again. This time it was not as dark and menacing as she remembered. The candlelight was artfully arranged, and the air was no longer heavy with incense, but carried the faint scent of lilies, a sweet fragrance associated with funerals. And this time, the attendees were not wearing masks. Elara froze. Standing in the room were the faces she had seen on magazine covers at the Oscars. A legendary actor famous for his heroic roles. A female director who had just won the Palme d'Or. A music producer who could create global hits. They were chatting, laughing quietly, holding glasses of wine as red as blood. They weren't the phantoms from her nightmares. They were her colleagues. Evelyn Reed broke away from a small group and approached Elara, a satisfied smile on her lips. "Elara, my dear, I'm so glad you could make it." She put an arm around Elara's shoulders in a familiar gesture, but her touch was as cold as ice. "I want to introduce you to the family." One by one, the most powerful figures in Hollywood turned to greet her. They shook her hand, smiled, and said they had heard so many good things about her that they greatly admired her talent. Each compliment was like an invisible blade twisting deeper into her wound of guilt. This was her price. She didn't just belong to them. She was one of them. When everyone had arrived, Evelyn clapped her hands for attention. A stone door at the back of the chamber slid open, revealing another space, a cathedral of darkness. In the center of the room was a stone dais, and on it stood a large oval mirror, its frame carved with strange symbols. The surface of the mirror reflected nothing. It was pitch black, as deep as a lake on a moonless night. "Brothers and sisters," Evelyn's voice boomed, echoing through the chamber, "tonight is a special night. While the world outside celebrates a false resurrection, we are here to perform a more important rite, our Black Easter." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. "Their faith is our greatest threat." she continued, her voice cold as steel. Their hope, their unity weakens our influence. So on their most sacred night we shall sow chaos. We will extinguish their light with our own darkness. Every tragedy, every drop of blood spilled tonight will be an offering to nourish our allies, strengthening our power for the year to come. She pointed to the mirror. This mirror of sorrows will be our window. Through it we will send forth our curses. A man a famous comedian Elara once loved stepped up first. He held a small silver bowl containing a black liquid. He looked into the mirror, and an image of a minibus full of people driving on a highway appeared on the black surface. A church group, Evelyn explained quietly to Elara, returning from a prayer retreat. The comedian began to chant words in an ancient tongue, then slowly poured the liquid from the bowl onto the mirror's surface. The image of the bus began to blur, enveloped by a black fog. On the highway, the real bus seemed to swerve. One by one, the other members came forward. An actress poured the liquid onto the image of an old apartment building, and the black fog wrapped around it like a python. A producer targeted a young couple strolling on a beach. Each act was performed with a calm, almost mechanical detachment, like office workers completing their tasks. Elara stood there, her body frozen in horror. This wasn't a symbolic ritual. This was carefully orchestrated mass murder. Then Evelyn turned to her. "It's your turn, Elara." "No," Elara whispered, her voice failing her. "I can't." "Oh, but you can," Evelyn said, her smile vanishing, replaced by a razor-sharp glare. "You signed the contract. You accepted the rewards. Now it is time to pay your dues. Loyalty is proven through action, not words." She grabbed Elara's arm, her fingers clamping down like a steel vise. She pulled her toward the mirror. Another member handed her a silver bowl. The liquid inside was cold and viscous. "Look," Evelyn commanded. A new image appeared in the mirror. A black car driving on a deserted country road. Inside was a family, a father, a mother, and two small children in the back seat. They were laughing and talking happily. A family with significant influence in the charity community, Evelyn whispered in her ear, her voice laced with venom. "Their fall will sow fear and doubt. A perfect sacrifice." "Do it, Elara," Evelyn urged. "Prove you are worthy of your place." The entire room was watching her. The eyes she had once admired were now judging her waiting. She looked down at the bowl in her hands. She thought about the roles, the luxury apartment, her name on the poster. She thought about the promise to her mother. Then she looked at the image of the happy family in the mirror. Her hand shaking, Elara tilted the bowl. The stream of black liquid flowed down the mirror's surface. The image of the family was consumed by darkness. Elara felt her knees buckle. An empty, cold feeling washed over her, extinguishing all emotion. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. She was no longer a victim. She was an accomplice. The ceremony ended in a satisfied silence. People picked up their wine glasses again, chatting as if they had just finished a board meeting. No one looked at Elara, but she could feel their approval in the air. She had passed the test. The next morning, Elara sat curled up on the expensive sofa in her apartment, staring at the TV screen. A news channel was broadcasting a breaking story. A tragedy struck late last night when a prominent philanthropic couple and their two young children were killed in a horrific car crash on the Pacific Coast Highway. Police are still investigating the cause, but initial reports suggest the car inexplicably lost control. The screen showed footage of the crushed black car. It was the same one she had seen in the mirror. A picture of the happy family was displayed, their smiles, now a silent accusation. A scream caught in Elara's throat. She ran to the bathroom and threw up violently. What she had done wasn't a ritual. It was real. She had killed them. Her hands were stained with blood. She collapsed onto the cold tile floor, shaking uncontrollably, sobs tearing through her chest. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty room, to a God she no longer dared to believe in. "What have I done?" Just then the doorbell rang. Elara flinched. She dragged herself to the door, hoping desperately that it was Chloe. But when she looked through the peephole, she saw Evelyn Reed standing there, a smile both cruel and serene on her face. She walked in without being invited. "You finally realize our full power, don't you?" Evelyn said, her tone both sweet and sharp as a knife. "The blood that was spilled will nourish our allies, solidifying our position." I can't go on," Elara stammered, tears blurring her vision. "I refuse." Evelyn laughed, a dry, emotionless sound. She stepped closer, her face inches from Elara's. "Refuse," she hissed. "You foolish girl. Do you think this is a club you can just leave? You joined. You signed. You acted. In our circle, the only way out is death." The apartment door clicked shut, the dry sound echoing like a gunshot, ending the psychological torture. Elara slid to the floor, her back against the door, her body drained of all strength. Evelyn Reed's words still rang in her ears, a sweetly delivered death sentence. "In our circle, the only way out is death." It wasn't just death. She had added something else, a venomous whisper before she left. "And let me tell you a secret, Elara. Those who refuse become an example. Their deaths are horrific, staged to sow fear, to reinforce our power. The blood of traitors nourishes our allies even more than the blood of the innocent." It was a perfect trap. If she obeyed, she would continue to be a tool for murder. If she rebelled, her death would become an even greater sacrifice. There was no clean escape. The following days devolved into a living hell. The luxury apartment was no longer a symbol of success, but a gilded cage. Elara didn't dare go outside. She drew the curtains, living in darkness, startled by every sound. Every time a phone rang, whether her personal one or the society's, her heart stopped. Calls from her agent announcing audition offers for blockbuster projects now sounded like the call of death. Paranoia began to eat away at her mind. When she risked a glance through the window at the people below, she saw familiar faces. Was that the comedian who started the ceremony? Was that woman the famous director? The entire city seemed to be watching her, an invisible web from which she could not escape. She lost weight rapidly. The nightmares became more vivid. She saw the family in the car, their faces twisted in terror. She saw the other victims of the Black Easter, nameless souls she had helped push into the abyss. They stood around her bed, their empty eyes accusing her in silence. And then, in the oppressive silence of a sleepless night at 3 a.m, a single stubborn thought pierced through the fog of her horror. Run. It was an insane, almost suicidal idea. Evelyn had made it clear there was nowhere to hide. But the prospect of being caught and dying horribly on the run was still better than continuing to live as a monster waiting for her turn to be sacrificed or to become an even more ruthless hunter. Acting on pure survival instinct, Elara sprang up. She wasted no time thinking. She opened her closet, ignoring the designer dresses and luxury items. She grabbed a few simple clothes, old jeans, t-shirts, a hooded jacket. She took all the cash from her drawer, her passport, and stuffed it all into an old backpack. The society's phone she left on the coffee table like a silent act of defiance. Before leaving, she paused for a second, looking around the apartment. Everything she had ever craved, fame, wealth, recognition, was now nothing but shackles. She took a deep breath as if to extinguish her fear and slipped out into the night. She didn't dare call a taxi from her building. She walked several blocks, pulling the hood over her face, trying to stick to the shadows of small alleys instead of the brightly lit boulevards. Every passing car made her jump. A black sedan with tinted windows seemed to slow down as it passed her. Elara's heart leaped into her throat. She ducked into another alley, running until she could no longer hear the engine. Eventually, she hailed a cab and asked the driver to take her to a cheap motel near LAX. She paid for the room in cash, persuading the tired night clerk to let her check in without showing ID. The room was small, dingy, and reeked of disinfectant, but to Elara it felt safer than any penthouse in Beverly Hills. Early the next morning, before the sun rose, she snuck out and walked to the airport. The whole way she muttered a desperate prayer. Please save me. Please save me. The airport was a paranoid nightmare. Every security agent, every surveillance camera seemed to be boring into her. But she forced herself to stay calm, to wait in line to go through the motions. She bought a ticket for the first flight out of California, a direct flight to Columbus, Ohio. Home. It was the most primal instinct. To return to the only safe place she knew. Hours later, when the plane landed at John Glenn Columbus International Airport, Elara finally allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The familiar humid air of the Midwest filled her lungs. For the first time in months, she felt a fragile glimmer of hope. She explained to her mother that she had come home for a surprise visit, that she needed a break, wanted to spend time with family to recharge. Her mother, overjoyed at her daughter's unexpected return, didn't ask too many questions. She was only concerned by Elara's gaunt, pale appearance. Elara believed she could find sanctuary in her childhood home. The familiar walls, the smell of her mother's baking, the small garden out back. But the society had planted its poison deep in her soul. Every night she would jolt awake, heart-pounding, certain she had heard a creak on the stairs or seen a shadow flit past the window. The smallest noise terrified her. She knew the society never forgot. Time was not on her side. Their influence was everywhere. They could be watching her right now, waiting for the right moment to strike to make her an example. And then one morning, 3 days after her return, her mother cheerfully brought in the newspaper. "Look, honey," she said. "My star is on the front page." Elara looked down. It was a tabloid, but its headline made her blood run cold. Rising star Elara Vance mysteriously disappears. Fears of kidnapping or mental breakdown. The article detailed her sudden disappearance, her lack of contact with her agent, her failure to show up for a script reading for her next big role. They had published photos of her in Los Angeles, and even a grainy long lens shot of her entering the motel near the airport. They had found her. Not only had they found her, they were toying with her. They were sending a message to the world. And to her, "We know where you are. You can't hide." Elara looked out the window at the quiet suburban street where she grew up. It was no longer a sanctuary. She had escaped the gilded cage in Hollywood, only to realize that the entire world had become her prison. And the wardens were closing in. The article was a declaration of war. Elara knew her fabricated peace in Ohio was over. The society wasn't acting directly. Instead, they were using their most powerful tool, the media. By publicizing her disappearance, they turned every face she encountered into a potential threat. A curious neighbor, a fan who recognized her at the grocery store, a lurking paparazzo, anyone could be an informant willingly or not. They were tightening the noose without lifting a finger. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She sat in the darkness of her childhood bedroom, listening to the steady tick-tock of an old clock. Each tick sounded like a second counting down to her doom. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't put her mother in danger. Her family's love and protection weren't a shield. They were a vulnerability the society would undoubtedly exploit. Before dawn, while the house was still asleep, Elara made her decision. She wrote a short letter to her mother, a letter full of heartbreaking lies. She said a massive opportunity had suddenly come up in Europe, a film that required absolute secrecy, and that she had to leave immediately. She promised to be in touch as soon as she could. She apologized for leaving so abruptly, but this was her dream. She knew her mother wouldn't understand, but she would believe it because she had always believed in her daughter's dreams. With a shattered heart, she left the letter on her mother's pillow, along with almost all the cash she had. She kept only enough to survive. She kissed her sleeping mother on the forehead one last time, then quietly left the house that had once been her entire world. She left everything behind: family, friends, memories, and the name Elara Vance. She took a night bus to another city, and then another with no specific destination. She moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than 2 days. She learned to live in the shadows. She chopped off her long blonde hair, dyeing it a mousy brown. She bought a pair of thick-rimmed, non-prescription glasses. She wore baggy, anonymous clothes. She learned to walk with her head down to avoid eye contact to blend into the crowd like a ghost. She survived on odd jobs paid in cash, washing dishes in a Chicago diner, cleaning rooms in a Denver motel, picking fruit on a remote farm in Oregon. Everywhere she went, she used a different fake name: Jane, Sarah, Emily. Simple, forgettable names. Elara's world had shrunk to a never-ending flight. She no longer dared to watch TV, read newspapers, or browse the internet. Her existence had been erased. To the world, Elara Vance, the promising young actress, had vanished without a trace. Her social media accounts remained frozen, displaying the last photos taken in her luxury apartment. Her fans still left occasional comments wondering where she had gone, but gradually they too forgot. The entertainment industry has a short memory. New stars rise to replace the ones who have fallen. But Elara never forgot. Every night before falling into a fitful sleep, she prayed. Not a prayer for forgiveness because she knew she didn't deserve it. She prayed for the souls she had helped destroy, and she prayed that her hunters would never find her. She knew the society never forgave. The cold eyes of Evelyn Reed. The image of the Ouroboros and the feeling of the black liquid on her fingers, those memories were etched into her mind, more painful than the brand on her back. Years passed. Elara, or whatever name she was using now, was a different woman. Her face was lined with exhaustion and anxiety. The radiance of youth had been replaced by a constant state of vigilance. She lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions about the past. One afternoon, while wiping down the counter of a roadside diner, she happened to glance up at the old TV hanging in the corner. An entertainment news program was on. And then she saw her. Evelyn Reed. She hadn't aged a day, still elegant and powerful in an expensive suit, giving an interview on a red carpet. Beside her stood a young woman, beautiful and ambitious, her eyes shining under the flashbulbs. The girl was Hollywood's newest star. Elara's heart stopped. She looked into the young girl's eyes and saw herself from years ago, naive, hungry, and completely unaware of the true price of fame. A new cycle had begun. A new soul had been chosen. Elara turned away, her hands trembling. She knew she could never truly escape. The society's shadow was too long and the world was too small. She would always have to look over her shoulder. She would always have to live in fear. Because she knew that one day, maybe tomorrow or 10 years from now, around a corner on a strange street, or in the reflection of a mirror, she might once again meet the ice-cold eyes of those who never forget. And on that day, her final performance would begin.